What steals your joy? Do you get up every morning just happy, or is there things going on in your world that just constantly rob you of joy? Today I want to talk about familiarity. I think familiarity is one of the greatest joy thieves out there. The things that used to give us joy, when we start taking them for granted, they just rob you of joy. And I find in my own life that if I'm not aware and conscious every single day about the things God's blessed me with, that I start taking them for granted, and then all of a sudden, stress comes in, and you get kind of tired and just familiar and with the things that are around you, whether it's your home, your family, your kids, your wife, and your job, your church. And there's so many things that just can rob you of joy. But today I want to talk about familiarity. And why is it that we treat people closest to us sometimes worse than we would a complete stranger? I've noticed that even in my own life, if I'm not conscious about it, we meet a complete stranger and we're all happy and we're joyful and we're just like, hey, it's so good to meet you. And then we get alone at home with our spouses and our kids, and then that's all the anger and the stress and all the stuff comes out. And I believe that's because we've become too familiar with the things in our life that are so dear to us. And it can so easily rob us of our joy if we're not conscious about it every day, and stay aware and keep blessing the people around us consciously every single day. My dad was a real interesting guy. I mean, I just absolutely adored my dad. He raised 9 of us, and so there's a wife and 9 kids. So at the end of a long day going up on a farm with these 20-hour days, he would come home and stressed sometimes, a little tired, and you could see, and just want to be left alone for a while. And here we are, whole 9 kids, especially when we were younger. We were all screaming for dad, and and mom's got all kinds of stuff she's gone through with us. So she'd be like, "Hey, you need to talk to your son, or you need to talk to your daughter." And dad at that particular point just wasn't ready. He just said, "Just let me relax for a while," and maybe get a little irritated and stuff, and just want to be alone and relax. But all of a sudden the phone would ring, and would go answer the phone, and it was like somebody wanted to talk to my dad. We're like, "Hey, Dad, it's for you." And he'd grab the phone, and his face would light up. He'd be like, "It is so good to hear your voice," and he was so happy and joyful. And then after the conversation with almost a stranger on the other end of the line, the joy would go away. It's just a real cool picture. We laughed about it later. We were chatting about it, and we just kept laughing about how easily we do that. With the people that are so close to us. Don't become familiar with your family and your spouse to a point where you just take them for granted every day. Those things that used to just bring you happiness, bring you joy. See, there's never a doubt in my mind how much I love my wife. I love her more and more every single day, but if I'm not careful, if I'm not aware of it, I start taking her for granted. I start taking my family for granted. I start taking my church for granted. I start taking for granted those things that God has so blessed me with in my life, and they just become just kind of the norm every day, and we just go through life, and at the end of the day, we look back and it's like, even though there's a lot of amazing things that have happened to us, we're just not happy about it. It's just another day. Don't do that, man. It's something that will rob you of your joy. In my own life, I've learned that when I do that and I become aware of something I've just said or done to people close to me, that own it quickly, apologize. I do this quickly now. It used to take me a while because this guy pride I had is like, no, I'm not. Now, if I say something mean to someone around me, whether it's a coworker or my spouse or people around me or somebody that's a really dear friend or family, I'll quickly go and say, "Hey, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have said that. Can you please forgive me?" And we just move on. It's such a great way to just restore that joy and to get back. There's no faster way to restore joy in your home and to quickly own up to these things that we take for granted. I want to talk about taking God for granted for a moment. I mean, I think it's something we do, especially when you grow up a believer and you go to a great church, great teaching, 3, 4, 5 times a week. We got church stuff going on, and it's all awesome, it's all good, and all of a sudden, one week you just realize it's just something we do, and it's robbed us of the initial pleasure that it gave us, and we're just like, well, yeah, I got to go to church again today, because it's just something we do, and we've lost that joy that it used to bring us. The Bible is really clear about some of this stuff. Nothing robs me of my joy more than when I stop being close to my God. When I stop just being that daily time, that intimate time I spend with God, it just robs me of my joy. And then when something comes up and something pops up in my life that I have to deal with, it's all of a sudden it just bothers me more than it used to, because I don't recognize that, man, there's God that's got my back. There's God that's always here for me. There's a verse or multiple verses in John 15, starting in verse 5, where Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. He says, those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask me for anything you want, and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. This brings great joy. This brings great glory to my Father. I have loved you even as the Father has loved me. Remain in my love. When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you these things. This is the key. This is Jesus speaking. There's 7 times in this scripture where he says, remain, 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 remain. It's about you remain with me. Don't take me for granted. I'm always here. I'm always here for you. Whether you're up, whether you're down, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. And just remain in me. Remain close to me. Don't take me for granted. And then in verse 11, he says, I have told you these things so that you may be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. Your joy is important to God. Your everyday life, how you go about life, how you treat the people around you is extremely important to God. He made a way for you to keep that joy. And I think the remaining in God, remaining close to the people around you, don't take people for granted. Don't take your church for granted. You know, if you don't have a church, man, find a life-giving church that's close to you. And then, you know, just get in there and plug in. You know, no matter what goes on. I mean, there's no perfect church out there, but I found out years ago that when I plugged into my church that I can't do without it. You know, I go away on 2 weeks holidays and I just miss it so much because there's so much going on there. And when I walk in, I just don't ever want to take it for granted. And just always remember that every single day of your life, God thinks about you. He wants you to be happy. Jesus said, I came that you may have life and have it in abundance to the full till it overflows. And that goes with your joy. But man, familiarity and taking things for granted can just rob you of that. Don't let that happen. It is a choice. Make a conscious effort every day to be aware of the people that God has blessed you with, whether it's your family, your home, your church, and make sure that you don't ever become familiar, because it is the number one thing that's going to rob you of your joy.